Hi and welcome to my Fusion 360 tutorial. Today we're going to be modeling the footstool that I have my shop classes do. And I am using the desktop version of Fusion 360, but if you are on a Chromebook or a computer that's not very powerful, you can run the browser-based version, and you can get to that by going to fusion.online.autodesk.com. And if you have an account created and you have access to Fusion 360 through the school or through some other account, then that will take you directly into a view that should look a lot like mine here. So yours may look very slightly different because I may have changed some settings, I'm not really sure, but I think it's more or less the same. I have this layout grid enabled. I think that shows up by default. A few things about moving around in here. You can always select in the top right corner this view cube, and you can turn your view this way. You can, if you get really zoomed in a spot, which I'm doing with my scroll wheel on a mouse, or you can two-finger swipe on a touchpad, but it's easier to use a mouse. If I get kind of lost and I have no idea where I am, like right now it's just white space, right? I could even look around and be like, oh, there's that grid, but I don't know. You can always point up at this home button up here and click on that, and it'll bring your view back to the default view. So again, I use my scroll wheel to zoom in and out. That's why I like a real mouse, plus the fact that if I click down on that scroll wheel, it brings the pan tool, which it looks like this little hand, so I can move my view back and forth around. And if I hold shift and do that, I can orbit. Yeah, I can do it on the view cube, but I can get a little bit more control with this sometimes, and it's just a little faster when I'm in the middle of working on something to hold shift, click that, and then click without shift to move around. But again, I can always reset my view by clicking home here. So one thing you're going to want to do as you get a new project started, and you only have to do this once if you set it as the default, but up in your document settings up here, if you click this little arrow next to document settings and bring it down, mine says units inches. If this is the first time you're using SketchUp, or sorry, using Fusion 360, it probably says millimeters. So if you click on the little edit thing with the pencil here, you can select unit type, inches, and then you'll check mark the box that says set as default. And when you hit OK, it will keep that for every project in the future for you. So since in America we mostly work in inches, even though it's a lot harder than working with millimeters and metric, it's kind of nice just to be all on the same page, so that everything is defaulting to inches. So up at the top here, I'll just show a few things about the program. We have this drop-down menu, which is design. We have generative design, render, animation, simulation, manufacture, and drawing. Pretty much for this class, or for modeling the footstool anyway, we will stick in the design tab. But I do use the manufacture tab when I am running CNC machines, plasma cutters, 3D printers. You don't have to use this for 3D printer, but you can. Laser engraver, things like that, CNC router. So that is pretty powerful. There is a lot of other powerful stuff in here as well. You can make photorealistic pictures of whatever you're designing, so that's pretty cool. You can animate different moving parts. So it's a really powerful program that can kind of do a bunch of different things. But we're going to stay in the design tab, and we're going to stick in the solid tab. There's also surface mesh, sheet metal, plastic. I've done a little bit with sheet metal, but not much with the others. So mostly we're going to stay in the solid tab. If your bar looks a little bit different than mine, then sometimes you may have to find an option in the little drop down in that section. So if you look at create, all the options that are up here are also down here, and a bunch more. So you may have to look for something if you don't see it up here. I think mine are all the default options though, so yours should look like mine if you're just starting a new user. So on the left here it says unsaved. This is, and then at the top it says untitled. if we are starting a new project, it's a good idea to, off the bat, just go ahead and hit save up here and give it a name. So I'm going to call this Footstool. I can select where I want it. I have a bunch of different projects going on. And so then I'm going to call it Footstool. And I have already designed this before, but I'll do it again. So now I see Footstool version 0. Every time I hit save, it'll change the version number. And a cool thing about SketchUp is Fusion 360 is a cool thing about Fusion 360 that's better than SketchUp. I really like SketchUp in a lot of ways, but Fusion 360 is much better about doing having a really rich version history and undo history. So there are a lot of ways to like go back and make changes to past things that you did, and it'll update. You can roll back to previous saved versions when you go to load in a file. So if you had one version of your thing and you decided you liked a previous version better, you can go back when you load it. You can select a previous version. So that's kind of cool. Every time you hit save, it's like a moment in time that you can go back to, and it'll remember all that. On the left here, we have our document tree. This kind of is all the different parts of the Footstool project. And so right now we have this little like circle button with a dot in it, sometimes called a radio button. That has the dots because that is selected, and we don't have any other components. If I close this, like I don't have any components under that. I think that from everything I've read and seen, it is best practice to have extra components and have each different part of your design to be in a separate component. It just makes it easier. Like later on, if you go to do some more complicated stuff like joints and stuff, that you need everything to be in a component. So I'm going to just show you that off the bat. So I'm going to right click on Footstool, and I am going to click New Component. The first thing we're going to make on our Footstool is the top. So I'm going to type top. I don't need to change anything else. The parent is already just the main project, and so that just is like a kind of a structure where you can define, say you had parts that were subparts of other parts. You can kind of define how they're all like related to you or to each other by this, but everything is just going to be a part of the main project, which is the Footstool. That's already selected, and if I hover over it, it shows Footstool V1 version 1. So I can just hit OK, and now I have this new component right here. So if I open up this little thing, it ends up with a copy of everything, kind of like it has in the main view too. And as we start creating sketches and 3D bodies, they're called, and different things, it will organize those in here, and it'll add new little folders. So that's how to kind of keep your project organized, is in this little file tree. So right now the top is active, right? It's got this little dot here, so we know that's the active component. So anything we create now is going to be part of the top. So the main thing that we're going to use always to start off with a new shape is the create sketch option up here in the left. So again, if you don't see it, it would be right here. Sorry about my dog. So we're going to click create sketch, and then it brings up this option here, and depending on what you point at, it shows different grids. And so I'm going to select this bottom plane because I want the top of my Footstool to be kind of in the horizontal plane, so it'll be flat here, and as we get actually creating things, you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to select this plane here between the green and the red, and then it gets started. Now mine just did something weird. If you look at the view cube, notice that top is written upside down here. The view is upside down. So I'm going to click this little rotating arrow to rotate my view around. I clicked it twice, and now I'm viewing it in the correct direction. And that just kind of keeps it doesn't super matter how things are turned, but it will make everything line up right when I hit the home view, so that it is just kind of, it looks natural and I don't have to like move things later. So notice that it turned my view though, so that I'm looking straight on to the top view. If I angled it like this, I would be able to see at an angle, but usually when we're doing a sketch, we want to be just in a straight on two-dimensional view. For those that have done some drafting classes or assignments, you'll notice that it's kind of like an orthographic view. So I am going to click top here and make sure that I just have that straight down view like this. So the first thing we're going to do is create a rectangle. So I'm going to grab this 2-point rectangle tool, click on the origin, which is where the green and the red axis comes together, and I'm going to just start bringing my rectangle up here. Now the footstool is, the top is 13.5 long, it's 13.5 long and 9 wide. So the way I did those measurements was I just started typing 13.5 and then I hit tab, and that brings me over to the other measurement dialog. So I'll undo that. So I can press R for rectangle, I can type 13.5, hit tab, type 9, and then I can hit enter. I don't have to put units because we set our document to be working in inches, so it does that automatically. Now there's a few ways I can do this next thing. I'm just going to go ahead and leave that sketch there, and that is going to be the basis for our top. So I'm going to click finish sketch, and then I can turn my view again so I can see it at a bit of an angle. And then we're going to select the extrude button. And if you hover over it, you can see that the hotkey is E. You can also just hit the E button. And I happen to have this area selected already, but you can just like click on the area in here, and then you'll see this little arrow, and you can start dragging it up, and it's going to make it 3D. Most of the pieces in our footstool are going to be 3/4 of an inch thick. You could literally type 3/4. This program's pretty smart and can do the math, but 0.75 is the decimal number. So I'm going to do 0.75 and hit enter. And now I have this rectangle, which is the top of my footstool. But hold on, maybe if you've seen the footstools, you know that they have a hole in the middle that's a handle. So we are going to draw that next. So I am going to start a new sketch. We're still in the top component, and if I do this drop down, I can see the different things. We just created this body, that's the 3D part, and the sketch is the two-dimensional part that is just the drawing that we based it off of. So I can leave those like that, and then I'm going to start a new sketch. Oh, I need to see this. I'm going to start a new sketch, click on this top face, and it brings my view back to this again. And now I need to draw the oval for the handle. To do that, I'm going to grab the line tool, and then this isn't a line that I'm going to like build anything from. It's just going to be a reference for me. So I'm going to go over on the right in this menu to where it shows, when I hover over it, it says construction. And that's going to make this line be a dotted line when I do it, and it's just kind of handy to not have it be like a solid line, because it won't try and make other changes based on this, which maybe will make sense in a minute. But I'm going to select construction, and then when I hover over around the middle of this line, it kind of snaps to this point, and it has a little triangle next to it. The triangle means that it's the midpoint of that line, and that's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to connect midpoint to midpoint, and then on this line, midpoint to midpoint here. So I'm going to get a plus, because the whole point of that was to find the center of my top. There are other ways we could have done it too, but that was just one of the easier ways. So I could go about this in a few different ways too. There's always different ways to model things in CAD programs. Sometimes there's better ways than others, but sometimes you can just kind of decide what works for you. So I'm going to click on this create drop-down menu, hover over rectangle, and I'm going to select center rectangle right here. So then I can click on the point where these lines cross and start bringing my rectangle out. Now this handle is supposed to be 4 inches long, so I'm going to type 4. I'm going to hit tab, and it's 1 1/4 wide, so 1.25. And I'm going to hit enter. So now I have this rectangle that is a reference for the handle. But I need an oval shape. It needs to be kind of rounded here, because that's more comfortable for your hand, and that's the way we're going to do it when you make it in wood. So we need to create some arcs here. Now I could grab an arc tool. There are a few options here that I could do, and I can make it work, but I'm going to show you how to do it with a circle, just to show you a few other tricks. So I'm going to grab the circle tool, just the default one on the bar here, which is center diameter circle. I'm going to click on this horizontal line and then click on the line up above, and you will see a little symbol here. Now hold on, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to do it again. So undo, by the way, is your friend. There's an undo button up here in the top left corner, or you can hit Control Z, and that's to undo. That's pretty much true for most programs. So I'm going to deselect construction line, because for this I want it to be, it's an actual feature that I'm going to use. So I'm going to redo that again and not in construction mode. I'm going to click on that. Now notice that the circle is blue. So something that is blue is not fully defined, and what that means is that it may not know exactly where to put it in space, and in Fusion 360 everything needs to be defined relative to other things, so that if it makes changes to certain parts, it can update all of that accordingly. So right now I can move this around. I did click on this middle line, so it has a constraint on it already. So if you look at the top here, we have this constraints bar. We have horizontal, vertical, we have coincident, which means two things are touching. Tangent means that a curve is just like barely touching a line at one single point, but they don't, like, if the circle was bigger, it would be touching in 2 points. We actually have a tangent relation right here too. So if it was a bigger circle, it would touch the line in 2 points. If it was a smaller circle, it'd never touch it. We want it to just touch here, so a tangent relationship is what we're looking for. And we have several others here too that you can hover over to see what it says. There's more down here as well. So the thing that we're noticing is that when I hover over this point, I see that it has this coincident constraint, and so that means that this point, since we placed it on this line, it automatically assigned this constraint. If I was to click on that constraint and delete it, suddenly I can move the center of this circle, but if I undo it, it stays on that line no matter what. I can move the circle back and forth, but it stays on that line. The other constraint that you can see here, this little symbol is a constraint. So it is a tangent relationship, so that's what we were just saying. It touches this line in only one place. There's some other constraints you can see if you really notice around here. So we have some parallel line constraints. This one is fixed horizontal, this line is. And if you actually like point at different pieces, you can see other relationships as well. So we want this circle to not just be able to move back and forth, we want it to be, oh, I had that constraint there. So I need to make sure that constraint is there. Okay, so we want it to just touch this line as well. So I need to add another tangent constraint. So I'm going to select this curve, click tangent, and then select this line. And now it fixes it touching this line. You'll notice it's black. I can't move it anymore. I can't move the circle at all. So it is fixed in space. And that is exactly what we want. But we don't want the full circle. We only want the part on the left here. So I'm going to grab these little scissors here, which is the trim tool. You can press T. And I'm going to click on the parts that I don't want. So I'm going to click this, and it just trims off the part until it touches the next object here. We could probably go through all these other lines too, but they're just construction lines, so they don't matter. But I'm going to just cut away the parts of the solid line that I don't need. So I'm going to go through the same process and do the circle on the right side here. So I'm going to start on the center line, start on the top line, and then I'm going to apply the tangent relationship between the circle and that line. And what did I do wrong? I must not have clicked on this line, so I need the tangent relationship here too. If you clicked in the right place, it would have done it automatically. And then I'm going to trim these lines here so that I just have that outer shape. Now I need the line tool, which is L, and I'm going to connect that point to that point, and that point to that point. Now notice that that area just kind of shaded blue. That means that that is a totally enclosed area. If I point at it, it just glows a solid blue. So when it's considering like a bounded area that is like fully enclosed, it ignores the construction lines. That's why I had you do it as construction lines. And then we just have this area here. So I have the stuff inside the oval, and I have the hole still is a hole, but that's in a different drawing, and so it won't show up blue. So I'm going to, instead of clicking Finish Sketch this time, I'm just going to hit E directly to jump into Extrude, which is back in the Solid Modeling tab, but it just takes me there automatically. And now I am here, and I have that shape to do. So I can just drag it downward, and I could select a certain amount of distance. I can type it in there. I can drag it. It is automatically showing up red here, because if you look over at the right here, there's a lot of options here. And it is defaulting to cut because it assumes, since we're dragging a shape through another shape, that that's what we want to do. So it's kind of smart that way. And that is in fact what we want to do. We want to cut that shape away from the main body. So if I just did it past my other shape, that would be fine. I could also say, instead of distance, I could say to object, and I could select the face here, or I could say through all. So if I had a bunch of different items and bodies and stuff that I wanted to cut through, I could say to all, and it would cut through everything. So I'll just click on that and click OK, and now it cuts that shape out. So now I have my perfect handle hole in the top. If you've watched my SketchUp video, this is all we would do at the top, but Fusion 360 makes it a little bit easier to round over the corners, so by applying a fillet option. So we're going to do that now. So up on the top here we have the fillet tool, which is hotkey F. If you click on that, we can start selecting the edges, and I'm just going to select them all, just clicking one at a time. You don't even have to hold shift or anything, you just click them. I'm even going to get the inside ones of this, of the handle part, and I'm going to rotate underneath and select all of these edges as well. In fact, I could probably have clicked on the rectangle and it would have done the same thing, but that's alright. So now, the cool thing about this is when I start to move this arrow, it does a round over on it. And it doesn't really know what to do if you make it too big, so you have to make it the right size. So the size we're going to do is an 1/8 inch. So you could do 1/8 or 0.125, and then hit enter, and that has the shape that we want. But the one thing I don't like is this looks like some sort of metal or something. It's kind of a gray shape. And so in Fusion 360 we can easily actually change the material that this is. So I'm going to right click on my top, click physical material. Actually, maybe I'll do it on the main shape. So I'm going to select that, right click. We could do it individually, or we can do it on the whole project. Right click, click physical material, and then it brings up this dialog. And I'm going to select wood. And the ones that have like an actual picture next to them look better than the other ones. So I'm going to pick some sort of wood, personally, I'm going to pick white oak, but you can pick whatever. You may be able to find a wood that you're actually making your footstool out of, but you might just have to pick one that looks good, because some of them they don't really have a great model for. So you'll notice the wood grain is running this way, which isn't really what I want. And there's probably a way to fix that in this program. If you can figure it out, that would be awesome. But I don't think it's worth worrying about right now, because this is just for looks. It doesn't really matter for the project. So with that, our top is done. So I am going to start on the next part of our project. Now, one thing that I think is a little funky is the view. It just looks a little weird because the back of this looks a little bit longer than the front. There's a view change I like to do on my view cube up here, which is to right click. Actually, it's already that way. I guess it was a trick of my imagination, but if I do orthographic, it really stretches it out like this. And so it looks funky to my eyes. So I like to do perspective or perspective with the ortho faces, and that just kind of makes things look a little more natural. Okay, so with the main footstool object, the active component, I'm going to right click on it and click new component and type in leg, because that's what we're going to work on next. So I'm going to hit OK, and then I'm going to create a sketch, and I'm just going to do this vertical plane. In fact, right now we're not even going to line it up with the top or anything, so I'm going to go ahead and hide the top. So we're just going to click on this vertical face here, and I'm going to work from here. So I am going to start a line, and I'll just go this way, I guess. And I'm going to make it 6 inches. By starting at the origin, I make sure that this is fully defined. If I create a line somewhere else, it will just be blue and undefined and just floating in space. So I'm going to create another line, and I'm going to start at the midpoint here, but I'm going to make it a construction line. So I'm going to select a construction line and then find the midpoint where the triangle is, and then come down. And I've just kind of found that this trick of making the leg kind of going down from the center and then going out to the sides makes it easier. So I'm going to type 8 inches because that's how tall our leg is. And hit enter. And then the leg is 9 inches wide, and I'm going from the middle out, so I need to do half of 9, which is 4.5. Hit enter. Grab the line tool again, 4.5. And then now all my lines can be solid again. So I'm going to deselect construction. And you're looking for a funky shaped eye now. So we're going to start from the end point and go down 2 inches from each of these lines. We're going to do that because of the shape of the leg. And then where the rail notches into the leg, it comes out, and let's call it a 1/2 inch. I think in practice it ends up being slightly less than that, but that's close enough. So 0.5, I'm coming out, doing lines in both directions. Notice how this has all these dimensions in here. It'd be a lot clearer if we move them out. When you do drawings, you should also try and make sure that you include measurements like this, but you wouldn't necessarily have to specify every single little measurement. When there's symmetrical things, I usually just draw it once. All right, so the last thing for these edges is to draw a angled line down from that point to that point on both sides. And then along the bottom we have to do this part. So it comes in 2 inches from each side, and then we have to do the arcs. So I could do this a few different ways. I'm going to create an arc. So do the drop down menu here, come to arc. And I'll do a center point arc, and I'm going to center on this line, and I'm going to click on that point and come up 90 degrees and hit enter. Now this dimension was kind of arbitrary, right? It could have been anywhere. I could end up with a different size arc. And I'm going to add in dimensions now. So if I hit the D button, I can click on that arc and click, and then I'm going to type 0.75 and hit enter. So now I have that arc that is 0.75. So sometimes you may not be able to fully define something right at first, but then you can add in dimensions later. So again, there's a lot of different ways I can do this, but I'm just going to do it this way this time. So I'm going to just click somewhere over here, click somewhere over here, make it 90 degrees, hit enter, hit D for dimension, click on that arc, and make the radius be 0.75. And weirdly enough, it did radius this time instead of doing the horizontal distance, but that accomplishes the same thing. So I'm happy with it, although it may look a little different on your screen. So either way, that distance is 0.75. So I'm going to start a line now, a construction line from this point to this point, and then I'm going to do one more arc, and we can do center point arc, and this one we won't have to do anything funky with. We'll just start at this center point, click over here, make sure it's not construction mode, and then click over here, and now we have that arc. And we have this pretty blue shape because that means that it is fully enclosed, and that's what we're looking for. So I can hit finish sketch, and now I have this shape that I can hit E and extrude. But when we slant this over, it's not just going to be extruded like this, it's actually going to be brought up at an angle. And so we're going to extrude it at an angle instead. So I can bring it this way, 0.75, and in the options up here I can actually specify a taper angle. And I don't think this is actually going to do what we want because it's tapering in all directions. So I kind of forgot that. So now I'm going to create another sketch and do it on this plane and create a line, and I want it to be 0.75 long, and then if I hit tab I can do it at 15 degrees, and then finish sketch, go over to the create menu, drop down, select sweep, and it's asking for a profile, which is this inner shape, and then I have to click on path and select that line. Now it will go the full distance of that, which is 0.75, and that creates my shape. And it's creating a new body, which is what I want it to do. Okay, so I'll click OK, and now I have my leg complete. Now, this program is a lot more complicated than SketchUp in some ways, but for those of you that have done that part in SketchUp, you'll notice that this is way easier. So you have to kind of mess around with tools if you're doing something new with this. I had to poke around for a little bit, but being able to do that in one step is so much nicer than in SketchUp. We would have to play with all these arcs and stuff. So I'm going to unhide my top and select my main footstool part as the active component, and I need to turn and get this leg into place, right? It's off center right now and it's just not where it's supposed to be. So we're gonna do some moving. So I'm going to click move copy, and I'm gonna select in the options, I'm gonna select components, and first thing I'm gonna do is rotate it. So I'm gonna rotate, actually first thing I'm gonna do is make a copy of it. So I might have to do that again. I'm going to select component, and it doesn't want to do it from here, so I might need to right click on this, move copy, and then I'm going to select create a copy, and that's what I'm looking for. So before I do anything else, I'm going to make a copy of it, because it's easier to do this, to rotate it after. And then I'm gonna, in the same step, rotate it like this to get it turned so that they're both gonna slant in. So I'll just hit OK, and then we'll move these again from there. So notice when I made a copy, it made a leg number 2. If I make a change in the first leg, it'll automatically make a change in the second leg too, which is pretty cool. So I am going to click the Move Copy and select Components and select this one, and I want to rotate it. And so I'm going to select the axis that I want to rotate on is this one. So I'm going to grab that line to rotate around, and I'm going to rotate it this way. It wants to snap at 15 degrees because of the way I angled everything, which is perfect. That's what I want. So I'm going to click OK. And then I can go ahead and rotate this one too, but I'm going to move this one into place first. So I'm going to do point to point, and I'm going to select this component, and then the origin point is the midpoint of this one. And so when you hover near there, it should give you that point. Oh, and then the target point is the this midpoint on this part. Okay, and because I did the fillet, it would have been easier if I did it later. Actually, I just did it in the wrong place. So if I hit undo, I select my component, I select point to point, I find this point here, and then I'm going to find the point in the top, which is kind of hidden behind my leg now. So I'm going to hide my leg and find that point on the bottom curve here. That's what I'm looking for. Unhide my leg. If yours wasn't kind of in the way there, you could have done that separately. So you could also do that in 2 steps. I could move this out of the way, right, and then that would be probably easier. Then I can select point to point, find the center point here, and then find the center point on this little bottom part of the curve. And then that's where we want it, except for we also want it moved in some. And so this is going to move in, and I want it to move from the design XYZ so that it's moving straight horizontally, and I want to move it to point, technically it's 2.25 from the very outer edge, and then we're going to subtract an 1/8 inch. So for you math whizzes out there, you might have got this before me, but it's 2.125 is the magic number we're looking for, which is 2.25 minus 0.125, because an 1/8 inch is 0.125. So I'm going to move this one again, and I'm just going to move it down out of the way a little bit. I'm going to rotate it around this line to 15 degrees, negative 15 in this case. And now I'm going to do point to point, find this midpoint, find that midpoint, and then translate it from design XYZ, move it this way, 2.125. And it moved it the wrong direction. So I'll hit undo and make sure that it's moving it in the right direction. It wants to move it negative, so 2.25 or 2.125. And now our legs are in position. I want to have them look like wood, so I'm going to go ahead and right click and select physical material, find the, actually I'll just do it from up here, the white oak, select it, and now everything is the same color. And happily the wood grain is running the right direction for these pieces. So now we have 2 more kinds of pieces. We have the rails and the cleats. And so let's go ahead and keep going and try and make those. So with the main footstool thing selected, right click and click new component and call this the rail, R-A-I-L. And hit OK. And then we're going to start a sketch on this plane where this touches here. And if it asks you this, just say capture position, because it's not where it was originally modeled, it's where it is now. So I'm going to create a rectangle, and I want it to be just a construction rectangle. And I'm going to start it at the origin and just bring it somewhere over here. And then we're going to make it go where we want it to by selecting collinear up here. So I'm going to click on this line and that line, and that line and that line, and then that way it makes it take up that whole space. So I'm going to define these curves here first. So I'm going to hit C for circle tool, kind of like we did on the top for the handle. I'm going to make a circle, and I want it to be a 3/4 inch radius, but this is the diameter. So as you'll learn in math, diameter is 2 of the radiuses together, because it's the distance all the way across the circle, and a radius is just from the center to the outside. So 2 times 3/4 is equal to 1.5, which is 1.5. Now I just put the circle kind of anywhere, and then I'm going to select the circle and put tangent, and I want it to be tangent to that line, and click it again and tangent to that line. I'll do the same thing over here, circle 1.5, tangent, there to there, and there to there. I'll grab the trim tool, or T, and cut those parts out. I'm going to leave these dotted lines because if I start deleting them, then I'll lose some of these these constraints, so I'm going to leave those there. So now I'm going to draw some lines and make sure it's not construction line, and then so I'm going to go from this point up to the bottom of this curve. It should have a little square box, and then across over to the bottom of this curve, and then down, and then connect these. And now I have that shape that is blue and enclosed. So I can press E to extrude. It helps if I turn my view a little bit to see what I'm doing. So I want to bring it out to the outer edge here. And so I'm going to do 0.5, because that's what that measurement is. But that's only part of the rail. I actually want it to be 3/4 of an inch thick. So I'm also going to do another extrude. Actually, I could do that in one step. I could do another extrude now, or I could go back and edit this one. By the way, at the bottom here, there is this timeline, and that's the cool thing. Another cool thing about this program is that you can go back and edit previous steps, and it will update everything automatically from there on. So I double-clicked on this extrude, and rather than doing one side, I can actually do 2 sides. So on the first side, I can do 0.5, and on the second side, 0.25 is what I want. So I could actually do this in one step, or I could do it in 2 separate steps, 2 extrudes. Either way, it works. So I have this now, and it is currently taking up the same space as the leg, but that's okay. I will fix that in a minute. So actually, I'll go ahead and fix it now. So I am going to use this combine tool up here. So the way it works is I can click on, you have to do this in the right order. So if I click on the rail and then click on the leg, it is going to use the leg to cut out that notch on my rail. Okay, but I don't want it to get rid of the leg, so I want to make sure Keep Tools is selected. And I have to make sure Cut is selected as well, because otherwise it will do other things. This one, it'll only keep the part where they intersect, and this one, it'll just join them together. But I want it to cut, so it notches that out so that I have this piece that fits there. I could have changed the way when I was drawing this shape. I could have included this line in there and extruded that and stuff, but I wanted to show you this cool combine tool. You can actually just cut out the shape that the other one's taking. So I'll hit OK, and now I have that little notch there. But I want to do the same thing over here, so I'm going to do combine, click on the rail first, click on the leg, Keep Tools, hit OK. and then I have my rail done. So I want to make another one. I'm going to first make sure that my overall stool is the active piece, and then I will right click on this, move copy, check create copy, and I'm going to come over here. Now I want this to be a mirrored version or a rotated version, so I'm just bringing it out past where I need it to be at the moment, and then I'm going to rotate it. And so the axis I want to rotate on is one of these horizontal ones. So I'm going to do that, and then the angle tool, oh actually I selected the wrong axis, so I'm going to deselect that. Let's see, it needs to rotate around a vertical axis, which I don't even have a vertical line on this, which is a little bit annoying. Actually, what I can do, I could turn it this way, and then, oh, I could turn it this way, and then turn it this way, and I would get the same effect. Why is it not doing that? Oh, I have to select this component, wrong component. I have to select this component and then rotate around this axis. So that's kind of a convoluted way. I think there's a way to mirror the part too, but that works. So I got it turned the way I want. Now I'll use the move tool one more time, do point to point, find, so I'm moving this piece from the origin point. The origin point is, sometimes you have to change your view. The origin point's right here, and I want the target point to be right here. And now it is perfectly in place. So now we only have one more piece, which is the cleat, which is the little piece that connects the leg to the top. So I'm going to look kind of underneath here and draw a new, well actually I need to create a new component first. New component, call it cleat, C-L-E-A-T. And then I can start a new sketch on the inner side of this rail. I'm going to capture position, and I'm going to just start drawing. So from here, this point, I'm going to come over, and this I want to be 1 inch. And then I'm going to come down 0.75, because that's how thick all our wood pieces are. I'm going to come back over till this slant, and then join that. Finish sketch, E for extrude. I'm going to do one side extent type distance. I'm going to do to object instead, and rotate my view around and select this object. And then I can hit OK, and I now have my cleat done. I could even put screw holes in it if I wanted. And then I just need to make another cleat, so I have to select the main stool, and I'm going to hide this rail for clarity's sake, and move this with the translate tool, create a copy, and I need to rotate it. This time I do have a vertical axis. Make sure it's the right component selected. Have this vertical axis. Might have to look from a different angle. rotate it around 180, hit OK, and then I can move it one more time, point to point. And I want this point to match up to this point right here. And then I can unhide my other rail, and I am done. There is, like I said, you could add screw holes here. I could even do my little countersunk, like cone shape, which you guys will understand if and when you get to building the footstool. But other than that, I am done. So I could kind of get this at like a nice angle, and I could take a screenshot of it. I can hide the grid, and it looks pretty good if you ask me. So hopefully you were able to get to this point without too much trouble. I know it was a lot to learn, especially if this is your first time doing a CAD drawing, so it's a computer-aided drawing. That's what SketchUp and Fusion 360 both are. And but they're super handy, and it's nice to be able to visualize all the different parts of the footstool before you put it together. So with this, I'm going to save this, and if you haven't already, you can add me to your team. So you can invite me to your Fusion team, and when you do that, it'll take you to a web browser. And you should have the projects. Let's see, for me it's Industrial Arts 7 and 8. And Footstool, and then oh, I was supposed to be adding to the team. I actually don't know where it is because they moved things on me. So I have these different teams here. My team is just called Nathan Morris. Whatever your team is, you can, well, you can share this project with me, so that's one way to do it. And you can send me an email, or I will put a Google Classroom link where you can upload it. So I'd actually prefer you do that. Not upload it, but copy the URL, the code here, so we can copy that, and then you can paste that in the Google Classroom assignment. So again, that's in Fusion 360 here. If you are over in the data panel and you go to you might be able to do it from within the program actually. If you click share link, you can share with me, or there's a way for you to add me to your team. But for being able to put it in Google Classroom, this is kind of more handy for me, because then I can make sure I can see when you've turned it in, and you can copy that link and paste it into Google Classroom. So with that, I'm going to sign off and hope that this went okay for you. And if not, then I will talk to you in class. Thanks. Bye-bye.